Right now, the biggest talking point amongst wrestling fans is who is going to be the remaining partners for both the men's and the women's War Games matches. Now, as of the making of this video, we have a confirmed War Games match for the men's side. That being the match between Solo's bloodline taking on Roman, Jay, Jimmy, and Sami Zayn. However, they've made it clear that this is going to be a 5v5 match, so that means that we still have two remaining partners still yet to be announced. And over on the women's side, it's still a little bit up in the air, but we can at the very least presume that we have a War Games match in the making. That likely being between the team of Jade Cargill, Bianca Belair, Io Sky, and Naomi taking on the big bads of Nia Jax, Liv Morgan, Raquel Rodriguez, as well as Tiffany Stratton. And presumably, we also have a missing partner for both the heel and the faces for the women's match. So in today's video, we're going to try and predict who the remaining partners for both the men's and the women's War Games matches are going to be. Here's a bit of a spoiler. For the most part, most of these don't make sense because I firmly believe that at the very least on the men's side, that this should just still remain a 4v4. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this video. So I'm going to give you options of remaining men and women that could potentially logically be inserted into their respective War Games match at the end of the month. I'm also going to tell you how they could make sense, but I'm also going to tell you why they don't make sense as well. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications if you're, oh my God, I'm just realizing these glasses kind of make me look like Bubba Ray Dudley. It's got the camo and everything. Devon! Anyways, we always upload daily wrestling content. Make sure you subscribe. You know the drill. And if you want even more wrestling content, don't forget the Patreon, patreon.com/SantiZap, where we upload 12 to 13 extra videos a week that never get seen here on YouTube. The link will be in the description. The link will be in the pinned comment as well. Just go check it out. I feel like there's a lot of great content over there that you're missing out on. All right, let's jump into the video now. Look, before I show you the candidates that I have for the women, let me talk about the state of the women's match and my overall feelings on it. Look, it feels like the buildup to this potential women's War Games match is entirely way too rushed, and it just sort of feels like they're putting together a women's War Games match for the sake of putting together a War Games match. It almost feels like in the era of Vince McMahon where they would have a gimmick PLE coming up like, oh, it's Hell in a Cell season. We have to come up with a Hell in a Cell match even if the feud doesn't warrant being in a Hell in a Cell. That's kind of what it feels like here, because this feud between these women that are involved in this match doesn't feel like it warrants being in a War Games match. It just sort of feels like a convenient match to put together because it just so happens to be War Games season. And I don't think that that's fair for the women, especially when you compare it to the men. The feud that's going into War Games totally and 100% makes sense to be in a War Games environment. It doesn't feel like a match being put in War Games simply because it's War Games season. And I wish that they had actually nurtured a good enough story to warrant the women being in a War Games match, even though I'm sure the match is going to be absolutely fantastic. Don't forget that when it comes to these gimmick matches, whether it's the Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, Money in the Bank, the women have just been putting on better matches than the men. So I still have those very same expectations out of War Games. It's just the narrative and the buildup to this just doesn't feel right. The other problem with the women are the teams. These teams make absolutely just no sense whatsoever. And frankly, the people that I have to potentially add to this team don't really fix these problems anyway. Like, for example, why would you want to have both of your top champions from the women's division of both Raw and SmackDown on the same team? It just puts you in a lose-lose situation. It's a lose-lose situation because either it's obvious because they're going to win, because why wouldn't you have the team that has the top two champions in your division win? Or if you put them to lose, then you just entirely diminish the importance of your women's champions in one fell swoop. It's a lose-lose scenario. On top of that, why would Nia Jax want to team up with Liv Morgan? Why would Nia Jax want to be on the same team as Raquel Rodriguez, the one that cost her the match at Crown Jewel? The team doesn't make a lot of sense. And it frankly makes less sense over on the women's side. Don't get me wrong. Naomi, Jade Cargill, and Bianca Belair make sense. They got history, the big three. But you add Io Sky in there, and then all of a sudden you have the sore thumb of the group, considering Io Sky and Bianca Belair had like a blood feud last year where they despised each other. So am I just supposed to believe that they put these differences aside? I'd be down to believe that. However, we also have evidence that Bianca hasn't put these differences aside because she still has a tremendous amount of hate towards Bayley. Warranted hate, by the way. And the same hate that she has for Bayley should be the same hate that she has for Io Sky. It doesn't make sense that they're on the same team. Anyways, again, nitpicking, but I don't think it's nitpicking. I think these are genuine problems. The match is going to be good. The match is going to be good. Let me show you the 4 women that could potentially be added to this match now. For the baby faces, the one that makes the most sense based on the landscape that's been laid out for us is Kairi Sane. Kairi Sane would be awesome in War Games. She's already an aerial assassin type of character, and she has Io Sky's partner. And if you put Io Sky and Kairi Sane in there, you could tell a story of descent between the teams that involves the women's tag team champions and 2 challengers. Not only are they challengers, but people with history against one another. So there's something that you could actually tell in terms of narrative if you were to add Kairi Sane in here. I think maybe the only not against Kairi Sane is that maybe some people would say that Kairi doesn't have the star power of the other women. Personally, I would disagree, but I totally get where you're coming from. But again, if you're trying to make this make an ounce of sense, then you need to have Kairi Sane in here to balance out Io being in there as well. The next one that could be said is logical just because of the current landscape of storytelling could be Bayley, but also at the same time of her making sense because she's already been involved in a story with Nia Jax and Naomi, who are both part of this saga. She also makes absolutely no freaking sense whatsoever to add to the team. I would say that she's probably the favorite to be added because she has that like recognition and the star power that some might argue that Kairi Sane doesn't have, considering this is a recent women's world champion, Royal Rumble winner, somebody that is a proven commodity in a major stage in PLEs. But her history with Bianca Belair wouldn't make her a viable partner. Her history with Io Sky would make her even less of a viable partner. She would literally have 2 arch nemesis in her team. It wouldn't make sense. But again, she's been already part of the narrative leading into this, so I could actually see a world where she gets added to the baby faces. But again, it makes no earthly sense whatsoever. And look, I'm okay with, enemies putting their differences aside if it was a big bad that they were going up against, but there isn't a big bad. This just feels like a match out of convenience. There isn't something that the women need to come together to overcome. And I just don't think that Nia Jax and Liv Morgan have played that role because that's not the role they've had them play over the last several months. Meanwhile, on the men, Solo Sikoa and his bloodline have absolutely played that role of a cohesive unit that people need to come together to try and throttle. So because there isn't that big bad guy, I just have no belief that somebody like Bayley would gel or make sense on a team of baby faces where 2 of them within the last year have legitimate cause to hate her guts. If she hadn't have gotten injured, Rhea Ripley would have been de facto choice number 1. That being said, there are episodes of Raw that could still have Rhea Ripley return. By the way, I haven't seen any spoilers for Monday Night Raw. Read the comments section at your own peril because I don't know if she's returned or not. I don't know the severity of her injury. It leads me to believe that the injury is probably severe enough that she's probably going to miss Survivor Series War Games, because I really thought that the match that made the most sense at Survivor Series War Games was a singles match between Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. Or maybe they could have done a proper build of Team Rhea versus Team Liv, but they haven't done any of that, which is why I don't think that it's going to be Rhea Ripley. But because Rhea Ripley does have all of that history against Liv Morgan, and when you look at the babyface side, the only one that has any ounce of history with Liv Morgan is Io Sky, and not even that much. The only kind of history that she has is the fact that she has a future championship match against her, but that's all. If you want to add somebody that's got obviously a tremendous amount of history against Liv Morgan on the team that's going up against Liv Morgan, then Rhea Ripley is the play. But it would just seem very random to write her off just to bring her back 2 weeks to a rushed built Survivor Series War Games match for the women. Also, if you have the 2 women's champion on the other side, in what fucking world do I see the baby faces losing when they've got Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair? That's a crazy super team, by the way. Anyways, I think it could make sense. It would have been a logical choice in a different time and place. If she were to come back now, it would still make sense. It would just feel rushed. Fellas, I love going to wrestling shows, and if you've ever been in a packed arena full of other wrestling fans, you'll know that a lot of them, how do I put this kindly, don't smell very good. And I've always been really careful to take care of my personal hygiene when I go to wrestling shows to make sure that I don't join the statistic of stinky wrestling fans. And now it's much easier to do so thanks to today's sponsor, Mando. Mando works so well because it doesn't cover up odor after the fact with heavy fragrances like certain other deodorants do. Instead, it stops the odor at the source by blocking the bacteria on your skin from eating your sweat, which is the actual cause of BO. What does this mean? It means that Mando is clinically proven to control odor for up to 72 hours. Mando deodorant was my go-to deodorant for a SummerSlam weekend, a weekend that I spent walking all over Cleveland, meeting viewers and jumping and screaming for hours in a packed stadium with over 50,000 people. And I may have walked out of SummerSlam incredibly tired. I may have walked out sick with the flu, but damn it, I smelled amazing from beginning to end and beyond. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick of deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like the mini body wash or the deodorant wipes. You also get free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers will get $5 off the starter pack with my exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off of your starter pack. Just make sure that you use code Santi at shopmando.com. Again, that is code Santi at shopmando.com. Thank you very much to Mando for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back into it. Candice LeRae is literally the only one that doesn't disrupt anything. She's literally like the only one that makes sense that you could add to the heel side. Sure, she's got a little bit of a micro beef going on with Tiffany Stratton, but really, like, that's just like the most minuscule feud that you could possibly think of. It's just who can be liked more by Nia Jax. She is the only one out of the 4 that I've talked that could literally just slide into place, make sense, and probably actually like enhance the match. And she's a War Games vet as well. Like, she's been in War Games in NXT before, so why not? And she's been getting so much more TV time, promo time. To me, if you're doing this, you're probably doing it to build her up to something, and this is an easy thing that you can just shift her into without, putting too many of your eggs in one basket. So if they are gonna do 5v5, I do pretty much guarantee you that it's going to be Candice LeRae being part of the heel side. I think in a different time and place, I might have predicted somebody like Chelsea Green because she's from Victoria, BC, Canada. This show takes place in Vancouver. If you don't know your Canadian geography, they're like really, really close to each other. Think Long Island and New York City, for example. But now that women's US championship is in play, I'm fingers crossed that Chelsea Green is involved in that for a match at Survivor Series, which kind of leaves us with Candice LeRae as the best available option here, and a logical option at that. Now let's talk about the men. And before I show you who I've picked for the men, let's talk about the state of the men's match. Because the problem with the state of the men's match is like the complete opposite from the women's. I feel like this is a justifiable War Games match that makes sense that they've built up to. The problem is that they're trying too much. It's already perfect. 4v4 is what you needed. And there have been way more 4v4 War Games matches in the history of War Games than there have been a 5v5. Granted, the ones that have happened on the WWE main roster since it became a show in 2022 have all been 5v5. So history kind of works against 4v4 and in favor of 4v4 at the same time. But it just shouldn't be overcomplicated. You already have the perfect people in it. All of them make sense to be a part of this, but they are dead set on making this 5v5. So let's see what options are available for us. The most obvious option, the one that's already been added to the storyline, is Seth freaking Rollins. And it's obvious simply because they've decided to go in this direction, but it also doesn't make any fucking sense. I know that he's Seth Rollins, there's history, yada, 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 but look, At the end of the day, putting Seth Rollins to team up with Roman Reigns, even if it's a team that just isn't gelling, maybe even if it's just being forced to be put on the same team, to me, in some degree, diminishes what happened at WrestleMania 40, which was Seth Rollins putting his literal body on the line to make sure that the babyfaces could topple Roman Reigns. And now he has to team up with Roman Reigns? No, I'm not buying into that. And it's not as if he's like super uber mega homies with anyone else in there. It's not like we've had some awesome on-screen relationship between Sami and Seth Rollins, or Seth Rollins and either of the Usos. Like, to me, they've just sort of been co-workers that have happened to be on Monday Night Raw. There's no earthly reason for Seth Rollins to join this team. And if you want to make the argument that the match needs more star power, maybe, perhaps. But I feel like with the 8 men that are already announced for this, it's got plenty of it already. If you're gonna say Seth Rollins for the baby faces, then I'm sorry to probably spoil Monday Night Raw, even though I don't know the spoilers. The other one's probably gonna be Bronson Reed. They've already pretty much telegraphed this a million miles away, all right? It's probably gonna be Solo Sikoa's bloodline helping Bronson Reed beat Seth Rollins. And that's probably what's going to cause Seth Rollins to logically align himself with Roman Reigns. And then it'll probably lead to Solo recruiting Bronson Reed. That's not having the script. That's just reading the most obvious tea leaves I've ever been able to read. And I feel like it would suck for Bronson Reed to get his win against Seth Rollins in that manner. I mean, it didn't really help Braun Breaker to get his win because the bloodline helped him. And I just don't think that it's going to help Bronson Reed either. However, if this is setting us up for a tsunami from the top of the cage, then fuck yeah. Bronson Reed literally only makes sense in this scenario if Seth Rollins is on the other side. On the other side, they literally the only way they make sense. Keeping in the tone of Seth Rollins, maybe it's not the bloodline that helps Bronson Reed pick up the win. Maybe it's a returning Drew McIntyre, and then we can start off with Drew McIntyre on one team and Seth Rollins on the other team. The setting up Seth Rollins versus Drew McIntyre is the next big feud going into the new year, Raw, Netflix, and the Royal Rumble. I'd be excited for that feud, but I think it'd be weird for it to start this way. On top of that, the bloodline has no bigger hater than Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre literally became the character that he is today because he went crazy over everybody being okay with Jey Uso just existing. And the guy that cost him the championship in the first place was Solo Sikoa. There's no fucking reason why Drew McIntyre would ever make any sense aligning with Solo Sikoa. Maybe CM Punk, if it's Seth Rollins on one side, CM Punk on Solo's side? I mean, that's weird, but it weirdly somehow makes more sense than Drew McIntyre because Drew actually has a tremendous amount of history with the bloodline. Punk doesn't really, aside from that kind of tense moment with Paul Heyman on SmackDown in Solo's bloodline. But it was Solo's bloodline that took out Paul Heyman, and CM Punk loves Paul Heyman, so it wouldn't make any sense for CM Punk to align with Solo either. And I'm only throwing this out there in the event that it's not Drew McIntyre that helps Bronson Reed, that it's not Solo that helps Bronson Reed. Maybe somehow it's CM Punk, and that kicks off CM Punk versus Seth Rollins as a feud. But CM Punk right now is so hot as a babyface, it wouldn't make sense for him to come back and immediately be aligned with the biggest heels in the game. I don't like this. We have The Rock as an option, and it's an option that makes sense, I suppose, but I don't think either me or everybody watching this video sees The Rock doing a War Games match. The only way that I could potentially see it happening isn't if The Rock is pre-announced and he's waiting in the cage. Maybe they do it a la Randy Orton, where he just comes out as the last person and he gets his full entrance. That's the only way I could see The Rock being a part of this. But logically speaking, The Rock could make sense as a surprise 5th addition to the bloodline on Solo's side. It would be like monumental. It genuinely would be fucking huge if this happened. I'm just having a hard time reconciling with the thought of The Rock doing something extreme like War Games. But then again, he had a 50-minute, basically no holds barred match at WrestleMania 40. So maybe the Great One is willing to do this, but that would be rushed. And The Rock, you know, he likes to milk these moments. He likes to milk the buildups to anything that involves The Rock potentially getting in the ring. I just don't see The Rock being announced as a participant when we're like, what, 2 weeks away to the buildup of Survivor Series? But then again, and I'm going to say it again, it could make sense as an actual surprise at the show for Solo's side. Another logical option is Hikuleo, but I feel like this would be entirely too rushed. You might know who Hikuleo is. I might know who he is, but you got to remember, like 99% of the people that are watching WWE do not know who he is. He needs to be introduced in such a way where it would make sense for him to be added to be part of this full match. I could see him maybe being somebody that interferes, like how when Solo was debuted at Clash of the Castle 2022, that could happen. But introducing him now would be trying to not just introduce him into the storyline, but introduce him to the wider WWE universe and trying to help us understand why he makes sense to be part of this match, what his family ties are, etc. And I just don't feel like that's enough time to be able to tell that narrative. For those that don't know, he is signed to the WWE. So I don't have like Zilla Fatu on here because, yeah, sure, logically, bloodline storylines, he would make sense, but there's nothing saying that he's been signed to the WWE, and I don't think that he will be for quite a while. But Hikuleo has been signed. He just hasn't been used. This could be a place that we see him, but I feel like I already said, he's more likely to be somebody interfering in the match than somebody that's actually announced to be in the match. Cody Rhodes doesn't have anything going on at Survivor Series. It's likely going to be Kevin Owens. Maybe he's a special guest referee for Kevin Owens versus Randy Orton. Maybe he's not on Survivor Series War Games at all, but he already has history in partnering up with Roman Reigns, which we all thought was weird for Bad Blood in the first place, but sure, he could do it again. But I feel like that would be a lot of Cody Rhodes bloodline fatigue. And I just don't think that people want to see this partnership again. I think people are ready to see Cody Rhodes do other marquee main event quality feuds with other people that aren't in the bloodline. But does he make sense? Yeah, he does. He does. He's already partnered up with Roman. He's friends with Jay. He's friends with Sammy, and he's a main eventer. He makes sense. I just don't want to see it is all. And if you add Cody to one side, would you add Kevin Owens to the other? This would actually make no fucking sense. Like Kevin Owens, his whole character arc right now is that he's having a mental breakdown and crashing out on everybody because Cody aligned himself with the bloodline. And it wouldn't make sense for him to then, in retaliation, partner himself up with the bloodline. I've been seeing a lot of people throwing in Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens into this match as fantasy booking. That shit doesn't make any sense. So here's my conclusion. From the women's babyface, the most logical addition is probably Kairi Sane. For the heels, it's likely Candice LeRae that makes the most sense here. For the men, I'm predicting it's going to be Seth Rollins, at least for the babyfaces. And again, I don't think that it's going to get overcomplicated. If I'm reading the most obvious tea leaves on the planet, it's probably going to be Bronson Reed helping the heels on the men's War Games match. All right, folks, that's it for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on this incredibly convoluted saga that is 2024 War Games. But that's it. I'm done. Get out of here.